Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me here today. My name is Shannon Bush. I am a project manager with the Berkeley-Charleston-Dorchester Council of Government, also known as the BCD COG. I am the project manager for the Harleyville 2020 Comprehensive Plan. So my purpose here today is to walk you through a slideshow presentation of essentially what we would have done for a public meeting or public workshop. But in light of today's COVID-19 events, we are trying to maintain the safety and health of all Harleyville residents and stakeholders. So we have opted to put this onto an online format with the hopes that you'll still be able to get the same thing out of it that you would have by coming to a physical presentation at Town Hall. So again, thank you so much for joining. I would also just like to remind you right off the bat, we have a community survey available for residents and stakeholders. You can access that right in that same place that you found this video. It's only 11 short questions with an estimated time of about 10 minutes to finish it. So I encourage you to please take that survey. And also please submit any comments, questions, ideas, or any other general kind of feedback related to this comprehensive plan right on that same page at the COG website where you found this video. Scroll to the bottom, look for ideas or suggestions in large, bold text. In that spot, you'll find my name, Shannon Bush, my phone number, and my email address, where you can contact me directly to submit any kind of feedback, comments, or questions that you'd like related to this project. And that would be very helpful for us, so we thank you. Moving forward. Today's purpose is to essentially review with you what is a comprehensive plan, like the point of it, the process and timeline for this project, and most importantly, the existing conditions for the town of Harleyville today, to give you that sense of baseline information where we are jumping off from. So part one, we're getting started with the question of what is a comprehensive plan? Essentially, it's a document that identifies and communicates a community's goals. It's providing a blueprint for future land use decisions in the town. It's going to serve as the basis for land use codes, zoning, subdivision updates, things like that. The content is going to consist of text, baseline and analytic maps, which you'll see a lot of here today, and other visual data like charts and graphs and infographics, things like that. It is going to serve as guidance for laws, policies, and programs relating to community development going forward for the town. It importantly offers implementation strategies and ways for the town to measure success of those goals that it's establishing. And even more important, we need to include a diverse group of community stakeholders and residents to be able to develop the goals and action plans within this comprehensive planning document. So that is why you are here today. And again, thank you for being here. Comprehensive planning in South Carolina, I'd like to give you a little bit of a historical overview. In 1924, the South Carolina General Assembly granted the local government's authority to undertake planning and zoning to essentially manage growth and development in the municipality. In 1994, the State Comprehensive Planning Act was passed, requiring municipalities to form local planning commissions and to facilitate that comprehensive planning process every 10 years. In so doing, that process needs to include an inventory of existing conditions. Again, what we are doing here today, what we're reviewing. And that is going to assess the 9 required elements that South Carolina established, which we will go over. It needs to provide a statement of needs, goals, and objectives in the community, which we will be working to establish with you. And finally, it needs to offer implementation strategies and timeframes to accomplish those goals and objectives. Those 9 required comprehensive planning elements in the state of South Carolina include population, economic development, natural resources, cultural resources, community facilities, housing, land use, transportation, and priority investments. Also a note that these can also include any additional elements that the community deems fit. So if you happen to think of important ideas or concepts that you feel should be included as an additional element, please be sure to note that on the survey that you take or by emailing me or calling me to let me know your thoughts on that. Part 2 here is the process and timeline for this comprehensive planning project. So from February to May of 2020 is sort of the research phase. So this consists of a review of previous plans and studies, reviewing the existing conditions baseline data, and providing mapping and visuals of that data, what we are doing here today. From about March through August 2020 is what we're considering the public engagement phase. So that includes workshop and open houses, which as a side note will be sort of to be determined based on circumstances going forward. The survey, which is up now, the webpage, which is where you have navigated to be seeing this material, and establishing the town's vision statement, goals and objectives, which we will be working toward. Recommendations and strategies need to be defined in this phase, and eventually we'll be holding a public hearing on those draft components of the plan. Going forward from about April to December of 2020 is more of the document production phase. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Here, the document is developed and a draft of it goes to the Town and Planning Commission for review and feedback, followed by public hearing on the draft and final documents. And then ultimately the document gets finalized and adopted by Town Council. Part 3, now we're just into that part of reviewing existing conditions. Again, those 9 phases or elements include population, economic development, natural resources, cultural resources, community facilities, housing, land use, transportation, priority investments, and as I mentioned, any optional elements to be selected by the community. Here we just have a context map for the town of Harleyville, just to remind everybody this is the sort of setting that we're looking at here. So this whole presentation is developed in a way to sort of look back first at the most recent comprehensive plan, which is in 2009, just kind of review the takeaways from that, followed by today's elements or a snapshot. So just kind of as an overview of how this is going to work. So in 2009, the sort of primary takeaways were the town's population growth was much slower than the county's population growth rate. The aging population, the overall population of the town was aging, so approximately 5 years older than the county average age. The percentage of females was increasing a bit more than the percentage of males. The Black population was increasing while the white population was decreasing. Attainment levels for education were slightly lower than the county, state, and nation. Income levels in the town were lower than the county, state, and nation. And as far as households go, the number of persons per household is decreasing and number of non-family households is significantly increasing. Moving forward to today, the chart on the left here is showing population change from 2010 to 2017 data. So the 2017 data is shown in blue, while 2010 is in green, showing both female and male as well as overall population numbers in those 2 years. You'll see that both the male and female numbers are decreasing in that time, over that time period. The chart on the right here is showing the 2017 population comparison between Harleyville, Reevesville, and St. George, just for some context. The takeaways here that I am looking for you to see are that trends are indicating that the town's population is decreasing. So my question to you is, as a resident or stakeholder, what are some of the possible causes of that recent population loss? Do you view it as a good or a bad thing? We'd like to hear your comments and thoughts on this. So if you have any ideas you'd like to put our way, just be sure to visit the COG website and send me an email. Up next here is the change in age cohorts. So that's looking at 2010 and 2017 data. A cohort is basically the same thing as an age bracket. So 2017 data is shown in brown, 2010 in green. The age cohorts or brackets, you can see some slight differences happening there. The chart on the right showing 2017 median age in years for Harleyville and some other areas for, again, context. Harleyville has the highest median age here at about 39 years old, just over the state of South Carolina's median age. The takeaways that I'd like you to see here is basically from 2010 to 2017, trends are indicating an aging population in Harleyville with some shrinking in some children's age groups, teens and adults, specifically 25 to 34, and pre-retirees aged 55 to 59. There's also some increases within the young children, those under 5, and some notable increase in those aged 35 to 54 and retirees, basically those elderly, retirees aged 65 to 85 and over. This next slide is a race demographics chart. It's known as a donut chart here. The inner circle is 2010 data, while the middle circle is 2013, and the outer circle is 2017 data. The takeaways here is basically that trends are showing a slight increase in racial diversity in the town in this time period, particularly from 2013 to 2017. In 2017, we see 1% or less of a few new groups, including American Indian and Alaska Natives, Asian Indian, Chinese, Filipino, and a few other races, including multiracial individuals. And we just weren't seeing that kind of diversity really in 2013, hardly at all, and very little in 2010. So now we move to the next element, which is the economic development element. And again, we are looking back at the 2009 plan first. Some of the outcomes from that 2009 plan, for labor force participation, only about 55% of the town's population was in the labor force, meaning employed or actively seeking employment. The town's unemployment rate was pretty consistent with state level at about 5%. Resident employment by industry, we were seeing about 22% of individuals employed in production, transportation, materials moving, 20% in management and professional, 19% in services, and 19% in construction, extraction, maintenance, and 1% or less in a few other industries. Some commuting characteristics at that time were an average commute time to work of 29 minutes. About 77% of workers drove alone to work. 19% carpooled, 2% biked, and 1% walked. And there were about 43 business establishments or industries in town in 2009. Moving forward to the today's snapshot of economic development, 2017 labor force participation. So the blue here on that chart on the left is showing the percent of people employed, while the green is showing the percent in the labor force. It's notable how a few particular age cohorts, specifically those 20 to 24 and 25 to 29, have considerably more people in the labor force actively seeking work than those actually gainfully employed. On the right chart, or a chart on the right, this is showing the 2017 unemployment rate among these different age cohorts. So the highest unemployment, interestingly, is those in the 25 to 29-year-old age cohort. And the overall 2017 unemployment rate was 16%. Some of the takeaways here is that unemployment has increased substantially from about 5% in those early 2000s to about 16% in 2017. And given today's circumstances, likely has gone up farther from that 16% that we just showed here. This map on the left here is showing commuting patterns, work destinations, and job counts for each of the destination areas for Harleyville workers. So just note here that this analysis is for town residents, but also includes a 2.5-mile buffer surrounding the town. So that's where you see this sort of orange little blob right here. So this is the town plus a 2.5-mile buffer around the town. So we're actually including some people here that live technically outside of the town boundary lines. But what we see shown in this commuting pattern is that the majority of folks here are commuting to North Charleston, Somerville, Columbia, and even St. George for work. And the chart on the right here is showing the number of commuters by type. We're not really seeing too many commuting habits change from 2010 to 2017. Mostly people are driving alone. Interestingly, the average travel time to work increased quite a bit to 40 minutes in 2017, so increased about 11 minutes. So the 2017 poverty status chart on the left here, note this is specifically for residents aged 20 to 64 years old. This is showing the percent of people in labor force in blue and unemployment rate in orange. So the left half of the chart is showing data for about 85 individuals who are below the poverty level, whereas the right half of the chart is showing data for about 355 individuals who are at or above poverty level. The chart on the right here, we see disability status change. 2013 is shown in green and 2017 in blue. Note the increase in the total number of those holding disability status in 2017. About 18% of the total town population is considered disabled or having some disability status. Additionally, 25% of the town's adult workforce, so that's those aged 20 to 64, has some form of disability, which is a pretty staggering number. Some other takeaways here, not shown directly in these charts, but are that about 20% of the town's labor force is living below the federal poverty level, and 24% of those below poverty level are actively employed. So these are folks who are working and still really not able to make ends meet. Here we have this chart on the left is the total household income in 2010, shown in green, and 2017 shown in blue. Note the 2017 increases in the lower income brackets toward the left side, particularly in the 10 to 15,000 and the 25 to $35,000 range, and some increases also in the high income brackets, specifically above 150,000. So the chart on the right here is listing the median household income per capita. I'm sorry, the median household income and per capita incomes in 2010, 13, and 17 with the inflation adjusted. So the sort of overall takeaway here is that there's, generally speaking, a decrease in income that we're seeing from 2010 to 2017, both in household and per capita income levels. And just a note, the average household income for 2017 was about $42,500. These two charts here are showing 2017 industries in town on the left and 2017 resident occupations on the right. So these are pie charts meant to give you a sense of, of the full pie, 100%. These are how we are sort of seeing the breakdown of the different industries in town on the left and the different resident occupations in town on the right. You can see manufacturing on the left really kind of jumps out as a large piece of that pie, and the educational services, transportation, warehousing are some other big pieces of the industries in town. And then on the right here, the two blue colors and the green, those three resident occupations are kind of the primary parts of that as well. Moving on to the natural resources element, looking back at 2009, some of the takeaways were town comprised of 3 different watersheds with a 19% total impervious surface coverage. Surface water was pretty minimal, just Tom and Kate Branch and the Little Walnut Branch. For wetlands, there's forested and non-forested wetland areas surrounding the town. Approximately 9% of the town's land area was comprised of wetlands. No FEMA floodplains. Air quality met national standards, so that's good. Minerals found in town is essentially the limestone quarry located in Harleyville. 4 primary soil types, including Coxville, Goldsboro, Lynchburg, and Rain-Loamy sands. And the vegetation is pretty woody vegetation throughout most of the developed areas in the town. And today's natural resources snapshot, we're showing here a map, which is kind of showing visually most of those things that we just talked about from 2009, but as of today. Predominantly it's a freshwater forested shrub wetland we're seeing in town. That's the sort of green look with the little like, looks like flowery things on the map. Some of the wetlands surrounding much of the town may create some of the challenges in site suitability for certain types of development. There's a good chunk of protected forest area, the Belfield Plantation and Brosnan Forest just outside of town limits, so that would also create another sort of restriction for growth. The Charleston MSA continues to meet the EPA's ambient air quality standards, so that's good. There's no problem going on with air quality. And again, still just 3 watersheds in town and 1 just outside of town, so no change to the watershed situation. This is our soils map here, and the sort of takeaway from this is that there are some suitability challenges that the town would likely encounter based on the sort of soil composition, being that high sand and silt content. Most of these sands have low capacity for storing water, so they're likely to have saturation at the superficial level. There's typically low organic matter, which is what you would look for crop nutrition, and low to medium water and wind erodibility. So there's just the challenges to be considering with the site suitability as viewed from soil perspective. Moving on to the cultural resources element here, looking back at the 2009 comp plan findings, strong history in railroads, sawmills, and religious institutions. There were no found National Register eligible structures, but about 20 or more structures were deemed to be historically significant in the town. No sites had been identified for archaeological preservation or register eligible. Natural or scenic resources, essentially the South Carolina National Heritage Corridor running through Dorchester County and the Francis Beadler Forest just outside of town are notable there. And 7 places of worship were found in the town at that time in about 2009. And also the Seesaw Days Festival was a notable event for the town. So family festival in September with arts, crafts, games for kids, dog show, poker runs, street dancing, and amusement rides. And a few photos we took of Harleyville on a site tour a few weeks back. Moving to just the sort of map of these cultural resources, note that the places of worship are shown in the community facilities map coming up. Again, so there's no real change to the cultural, historic, or archaeological sites previously identified in town in 2009 and then again as of today. But again, those still may warrant some local preservation efforts. And as of today, we actually identified 11 places of worship in town, so that has increased in time. The community facilities element in 2009, some of the findings were that the Harleyville wastewater treatment plant had upgraded to an increased 0.155 million gallons per day. And we had just seen some pump replacements going on in the town. So the public water system is, all town residents within 300 feet of that line are required to tap into it. Lawn maintenance was the only alternative reason why folks might be permitted to private wells. Trash was collected on Tuesdays, and there was no recycling pickup program in town, but a recycling center drop-off at 455 7 Mile Road. Emergency services, we had a volunteer fire department serving 25 square miles, EMS station fully staffed 24/7, and police station with 7 personnel in 2009. Public education, the town is within the county school district number 4, comprised of 5 schools, and it is worth noting here that public education was a high concern among residents during that 2009 comp plan. It was identified as being a concern that a lot of folks discussed. Social services, the senior center located in Dorchester County and a group home for women in town known as Laurel Manor. Government facilities, town was governed by a mayor and 4-member town council, no real change there, and town hall, no change there. Recreational facilities, at the time we had 4 baseball fields, 2 tennis courts, a playground, and a community center. And worth noting here that many folks at that time were noting the need for expanded recreational services as a typical concern. Here we have just a couple nice images of some of those community facilities in town today. Again, these photos were taken just a few weeks ago. And that community facilities snapshot map from today. So a few things worth noting is the town hall, 2 fire and EMS stations, a police station, 11 places of worship, as we noted before, fraternal organizations, school, and those few historic sites and cemeteries, some of which were inside or just outside of town limits. Looking back at the 2009 housing element here, the housing stock was showing essentially steady growth in units from 1970 through 1990. and then a 10% decrease in housing stock by 2000. 32 vacant units in town in 2000. Some of the housing types found, this is from, again, 2000 data. This was, as a side note, just due to some data not being readily available in 2009 when this comp plan was written. So just worth noting that some of this data is from 2000. So the 2000 census was showing 65% single family homes in town, 9% multifamily, 25% mobile homes, and 1% of homes were categorized as boat, RV, van, or other. There was no kind of overcrowding issues apparent in 2000 with just one person per room or less. The date of construction of the housing stock was showing about 87% of housing being built before 1990. And the median year built was, at that time, was 1968. The housing tenure was showing about 28% of homes being renter occupied and 72% being owner occupied. Median home value in 2000 was about $66,000, which is markedly lower than the overall census tract in the area. And as for affordability, about 20% of homeowners paid greater than 30% of their income on housing expenses. And generally, 2006 data was indicating decreasing housing affordability happening in the town. Here we have just like a nice little collage of some of the typical homes in Harleyville, just to give you a sense of kind of what we're talking about here. So today's housing snapshot. Again, this is data from 2017 that we're looking at. So the chart on the left here, we're showing the year built of the town's housing stock as of 2010 in green and 2017 in blue. Note the decrease of about 100 homes between that time period that we see showing up by 2017. You can see that right here. There's a pretty significant loss of homes in that time period. Seemingly, when you kind of look at this data, most of it would indicate that that loss of homes was coming from structures built in the 50s and then about the 70s through early 2000s. That seems to be kind of the housing stock that was lost, accounting for those 100 homes. The chart on the right here is showing housing occupancy changes in 2010, 13, and 17. Note the decrease in total occupancy from 2010 to 2017. Meaning this gray, right, or I'm sorry, this green right here. And the slight decrease in owner occupancy at that time too is also worth noting, which is shown in blue on that chart. Some of the takeaways here are that we have an aging housing stock in town, just kind of as we had talked about in the 2009 comp plan. And new homes are being built through the 90s, but that really slowed substantially in the 2000s and thereafter. So that's something that we will want to talk about further with housing needs going forward. Coming up next year, the chart on the left is showing the gross rent as percentage of household income, known as GRAPI. The data is showing 2013 in brown and 2017 in blue here. There's a substantial increase in those paying more than 35% of income in housing costs. So I want you to kind of pay close attention to these areas here. The sort of general rule of thumb is that if an individual is paying greater than 30% of his or her income in housing, you can assume that that individual is going to be financially burdened by that high cost of housing. So when we see this kind of change happening here, 2013 in brown, about 30% are paying 35% or more, and then by 2017 in blue, we've got over 50% paying 35% or more of their income. So that just means a really large proportion of the town residents are paying a substantial amount of their income on housing costs alone. And then this chart on the right here showing gross rent in 2010, 13, and 17. Essentially the overall gross rent costs, or we're showing the gross rent costs over time, and we're seeing that rents are seemingly going up. That's kind of the takeaway here. Renters in town are increasingly cost burdened by housing, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their household income on housing alone. So that's something that we want to look out for, because that means that they are not having much money available beyond that for other necessities such as food, clothing, medical help, and the ability to spend money to help the economy. So housing costs are going to be, I think, a particularly important issue going forward for this plan. This chart on the left here is showing the value of owner-occupied units in 2019 in green and 2017 in blue. Some noticeable decreases in most of these brackets over time, only exception really being houses valued over $300,000, sort of the top half of that chart. And the chart on the right here is selected monthly owner costs as a percentage of household income. So that's showing the housing cost burden for homeowners. So we just looked at that same kind of evaluation for renters. This is now looking at the evaluation for homeowners. Again here, note this increase in those paying greater than 35% of their income in housing costs. So in 2010, we were looking at about just shy of 30% of households paying over 35% of their income. But by 2017, that's jumped to about 42% of households paying, essentially financially burdened by housing costs. About 50% of all homeowners in town in 2017 are financially burdened by housing costs. So that's, again, pretty significant number. And a few more takeaways here is, I don't have this shown in these charts. The number of homes with a mortgage cut in half was cut in half by 2017, and about 50% of all homeowners in 2017 are paying greater than 30% of their income on housing costs. So now we are looking back at the 2009 land use element. What I want you to kind of just take note of here is that the 2009 total acreage in town of about 652 acres, we see right here, compared to the future land use mapping and district acreages as imagined in the 2009 comp plan, which totals just over 2,000 acres. So it's a substantial increase, almost tripling, more than tripling of total land acreage, likely imagined to take place by annexation. A question in our survey actually speaks to this specifically, asking for your opinion about whether the town should continue to move forward with the idea of annexing some nearby land to grow the acreage in town, or if you feel differently about that now. So please, again, be sure to check out the survey. So here we just have a Harleyville land use map, and just note this is based on Dorchester County's tax assessment categories. So you may notice some things here that are slightly out of line with what you would perceive. So that might just be due to some slight discrepancies between county data and the reality of things on the ground. So land use within the town is primarily agricultural and residential. Commercial land uses are pretty much concentrated along Main Street, Kate Street, Bowman, and Judge Streets. And some additional uses within the town include municipal, institutional, and religious uses kind of scattered about. This here is the zoning map as of 2020. So these should be incorporating, to the extent possible, any recent changes that may have occurred with rezoning of particular parcels. So the town's current zoning ordinance includes 6 different zoning districts. The majority of land within the town is zoned for residential and or agricultural purposes. So that's basically what's shown in light green and yellow. And the town center zoning district is centered at the intersection of Main Street and Kate Street, which is that kind of a salmon-y pink right here. This is what we are referring to as our town center zoning district. This map is showing us vacant parcels with the underlying land use as a base map. So vacant parcels are shown by this crosshatch right here. So I just want to note it's very few actually vacant parcels in town, about 14 in total as of 2019-2020 data. And most of these vacant lots are under private ownership. So that really means that there may not be a lot of potential for redeveloping those areas, but it's something to think about and discuss moving forward if the town is interested in growing. So moving to the 2009 review of the transportation element, the road network was basically showing a well-connected town connected by I-26, highways 178 and 453, and a variety of arterials, collectors, and local roads, of course. Not too much congestion happening at that time. SCDOT data reported slight increases in daily traffic from 2006 to 7, but nothing too dramatic. Public transportation in the fall of 2008, there's this discussion of 2 Dorchester County park and ride locations for the Tri-County Link. And the rail network, as we probably all know, CSX Corporation owns and operates a rail line that runs through town. For air travel, general aviation airports located in St. George and Somerville, and of course, the International Airport in Charleston County. For bicycle and pedestrian network, there are no designated bike lanes at that time. I do recall that has since changed, and we can actually see it coming up in a photo here. But there are sidewalks located along both sides of Main Street throughout town in 2009. And for work commuting, the average resident commute was less than 30 minutes at that time, using varying forms of transportation. So here, as I mentioned, you can actually see some designated bike lanes. We've got the share the road sign, and this right here would be the designated bike lane, but we think we're just not able to see that little graphic of a bike. And we did actually get some photos of these ADA accessibility features along sidewalks, which are really great to see. So we do have some good safety features for anyone in town needing that kind of added safety. Here we have a simple map of today's transportation. The town essentially remains well connected to the rest of Dorchester County and the larger Tri-County area and state by proximity to those same highways previously discussed. No real change to the CSX railway still there, and some bike and pedestrian infrastructure has been implemented in the town center since the 2009 plan. The priority investments element is really something that will evolve over time in this project. Just worth noting that in 2009, there was discussion of the need for a capital improvements plan. That the 2009 comprehensive plan just recommended that the town create one to identify any needed public infrastructure projects. And for today, the 2020 comprehensive planning effort will continue that sort of effort to go about helping town officials and residents to identify potential investment opportunities, and need for public infrastructure projects may sort of come up in our discussions for this comprehensive plan. Just another reminder, please submit any of your questions, comments, or any kind of general feedback related to this comprehensive planning project on the BCD COG website. And here I just have a series of just kind of general questions that will hopefully just get your mind reeling, thinking about these things, and thinking about what kind of conversations you would like to have had if you were physically present for a public workshop. These are usually the kinds of conversations that evolve somewhat organically. So I'm just kind of asking them of you in text here, and feel free to just submit your comments and thoughts in written form via email, or feel free to give me a call. Again, my information is shown at the on the COG website, just same place where you accessed this PowerPoint. You will see my email address and my phone number. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.